They say that a hero can only be as good as their villains, and Batman has certainly had his fair share of memorable villains. As throughout his nearly 80-year-long career, we have seen the Dark Knight go up against many memorable foes, such as the Joker, Catwoman, Two-Face, Harley Quinn, and Bane, to name but just a few. But what about the more rubbish Batman villains we've seen him go up against over the years? The ones that are less fame and more lame. The more rubbish villains that make you wonder, is it really worth turning on the bat signal today? And Lord knows, over the years there have been plenty of terrible Batman villains, many of whom have now been forgotten. But luckily, I'm here to help us all remember, as we go through my list of 10 weirdest Batman villains. So, of course, let's check it out. Number 10, the Crazy Quilt. Yep, indeed. Not only does this supervillain commit the crimes of bad fashion, what with his multicolored costume, but his evil scheme is just as bonkers as his attire, as his goal is to steal all of Gotham City's color. Whatever the hell that means. And to make matters worse for the Crazy Quilt, even in the comic book, no one even takes this, quote, villain seriously, suggesting that even the writers knew that they had indeed invented a villainous dud. The fact that no one takes the Crazy Quilt seriously causes him to have a tantrum meltdown where he squirts paint at some of the street signs of Gotham City in a desperate attempt to be taken seriously. Oh no, quick, someone stop him. Yeah, I guess. Making him more of a mild annoyance than a supervillain. Sorry, Crazy Quilt, but no one is taking you seriously today. Number 9, Calendar Man. Calendar Man first started his crime wave of Gotham City in 1958. So what is Calendar Man's gimmick? Apart from his love of red and white bed sheets? Well, Calendar Man is very particular with his crime sprees, as he only commits crimes on holidays and certain dates. Hence his name, Calendar Man. Yep, Calendar Man probably has to be the most OCD villain of them all, as he will only commit crimes on certain dates on holidays, making you wonder just what on earth does he do on all the other days during the year. But to be fair though, in modern times they have changed Calendar Man and made him a bit more of a menacing foe. But if you have ever looked at a calendar and found it a little bit intimidating, well, that's probably because at some stage you've read the bizarre exploits of Calendar Man. Number 8, Kite Man. Kite Man flew his way into the Batman mythology in 1960, where he literally uses kites to attack Batman. Yep, Batman, Gotham's Dark Knight, who has gone up against some of the deadliest villains of all time, has to do battle against kites. Now, to be fair, some of those kites do look pretty deadly, and like they might give Batman a nasty paper cut. Kite Man has such a love of kites, he even has a kite logo on his chest. Yep, you don't mess with that. Messing with someone who is that committed to their love of kites can only end in disaster. But jokes aside though, as Kite Man actually does manage to wallop Batman by punching him in the face, which must have been a very embarrassing day for the Cape Crusader. Number 7, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze. When Mr. Freeze debuted in Batman comics in 1959, he was known as Mr. Zero, and he was pretty much a bank robber who used a freeze gun. However, in later times, Mr. Freeze became a tragic, compelling supervillain, who was a scientist who was looking for a cure for his terminally ill wife, but after a laboratory accident, he was left with his body in permanent freezing temperatures, in which he needed to constantly wear special equipment in order to survive. Jump to Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin, and this truly tragic character was played by none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was armed and loaded with a never-ending supply of ice puns.
Freeze well. Stay cool, bird boy. Let's kick some ice.
Literally, nearly everything he says is an ice pun.
Can you feel it coming? The icy cold of space. You are not sending me to the cooler. What hell? Freeze is over.
If you feel like your life is lacking in ice puns, then Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze is the villain for you.
I find that unlikely.
They basically turned this character into a joke. And what's worse is that this rendition still went with the whole tragic dying wife backstory. It's like, oh no, my wife is dying and my body has been damaged by freezing temperatures. Yep, time to roll out them ice puns.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Number 6, Polkadot Man. Yep, next we have the curious case of Polkadot Man, a supervillain who has the ability to turn the polka dots on his costume into weapons. Not only does this foe baffle the mind, but also logic. But despite his surreal polka dot abilities, let's face it, this villain was doomed from the start thanks to his more than ridiculous look. Sadly, no matter how much you try to make a villain interesting, once you make them look like this, there is really no hope for them. No matter how threatening you try to make Polkadot Man's polka dots. Wow, did I really just say that? Number 5, Egghead. Egghead was a Batman villain made up for the 1960s Batman TV show, and was played by the legendary Vincent Price.
Excellent. I might even go so far as to say exquisite.
Not only did Egghead literally have a head the shape of an egg, but he also really liked eggs. Like, as in a lot. As he would often use eggs to try and defeat Batman. Yep, to hell with guns and other weaponry, Egghead goes all out and uses eggs to destroy his opponents. Egghead is pretty much just a product of his time. The surreal 60s, a time where eggs could be used as the basis for creating a super foe. Still, Vincent Price does bring a lot of fun and joy to the role, so there is always that.
All the king's horses and all the king's men won't be able to put you together again.
Number 4, the Rainbow Creature. Okay, this is where things get really weird. In 1960, Batman and Robin went to South America to track down a would-be dictator called Diaz, where they come across this giant rainbow-coloured monster who defeats Batman and Robin by, wait for it, turning them into paper and then blowing them away. Well, of course! How else would you expect a rainbow monster to defeat Batman? Yep, the old classic, turn them into paper trick. Each of the colours of the rainbow creature can perform some deadly function, for example freezing or burning. But after Batman and Robin defeated the rainbow creature, he turned into dust and blew away, never to be seen again. Which, I don't know why, is kind of sad. Speaking of sad, this brings us to our next villain. Number 3, Baby Doll. Well, this brings us to Baby Doll, who like Egghead was invented for a Batman TV show, in this case the brilliant and haunting Batman animated series of the 90s, a show that also introduced us to Harley Quinn. However, Baby Doll hasn't become as memorable. Baby Doll is a former child star of a popular sitcom called Love the Baby. However, Baby Doll also has a genetic disorder, which means that she is forever stuck in the form of a toddler, no matter how old she is. Feeling disgruntled that the show was cancelled, Baby Doll's master plan is to kidnap the cast and crew of the TV show in order to get the show back on air. Because, I guess Baby Doll has to pay the bills somehow? Unlike the movies that were coming out at the time, the Batman animated series always took its subject matter into a really mature direction, and Baby Doll is no exception, as the story was actually quite tragic and sad. And I remember the end of that episode in particular really had an impact on me. And the condition Baby Doll has is based on a real life condition called hypoplasia, which only adds to the sadness of Baby Doll. Number 2, the Penny Plunderer. Yep, now just guess what the Penny Plunderer's gimmick is. Come on, just take a wild guess. Yep, that's right. He goes around ice skating while reciting Shakespeare. Okay, not really. Of course, the Penny Plunderer's thing is pennies. And the Penny Plunderer literally attacks his adversaries by throwing pennies at them, probably making him the most financially generous supervillain ever. Yep, the Penny Plunderer actually tried to make free money seem threatening. But what's even more fascinating about the Penny Plunderer is his lasting effect that he's actually had on the Batman mythology. Because, have you ever noticed that giant penny that seems to always be on display in the background in the Batcave? Well, that coin is actually from the Penny Plunderer himself, from when he tried to defeat Batman with a giant coin. So from now on, every time you see the giant-sized penny in the Batcave, you will always be reminded of that time Batman went up against a villain who threw pennies at people. Number 1. The Calculator. Probably the only supervillain in history to try and make a calculator seem threatening. This superpowered villain had such a love of calculators, he has a giant calculator strapped to his chest and a lead-lined panel on his forehead, making him look like one mean calculator. The calculator first started hassling the Dark Knight in the 1970s, and we can only imagine that he was created at a time when calculators were fairly new, and we didn't know what their full capabilities could be if put in the wrong hands, other than solving mathematic equations, of course, as apparently in the 1970s, calculators had the ability of making giant cranes appear out of nowhere. Where does the crane even come out from? The fact that the Batman comic book writers must have been so out of ideas they tried to make a supervillain out of a calculator earns this utterly bizarre villain at the number 1 slot in this countdown. Well guys, that was my look into weirdest Batman villains. I hope you were entertained and have an appreciation of Batman's more well-known villains. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm going to take over the world with a calculator. A calculator, I tell you! See ya.